You're listening to a Roddenberry podcast.
Don't touch that dial. We'll be right back. We'll have more news this evening, but first...
The latest Gene-ology, a Roddenberry podcast.
Episode 42, The Girls. Welcome to Mission Log Gene-ology. I'm Earl Green.
And I'm Ashley Thomas.
Each week on Gene-ology, we ford the streams and try not to contract dysentery as we wade through Gene Roddenberry's early TV work, looking for the kinds of morals, meanings, and messages that would become part of his most famous creation, Star Trek.
This week, we're riding along with Paladin for an episode of Have Gun, Will Travel that seems strangely familiar once you wash off all the mud. Earl will be back with trivia in just a moment, but first, here is how you can reach us. Gene-ology is meant to be entertaining and informative, but it's also just the beginning of an ongoing conversation about the works of Gene Roddenberry. Drop us a line at missionlog@roddenberry.com and join us on X and Facebook at missionlogpod. While you're at it, leave us a review and rating at Apple Podcasts or your favorite podcast platform. And please remember, your comments could be used on future installments of Gene-ology. And now, this week's trivia. Take it away, Earl.
Thank you, Ashley. The Girls is episode 3 of season 3 for Have Gun, Will Travel, and it aired on Saturday, September 26th, 1959. Andrew McLaughlin is back in the director's seat for this episode, the second in a string of 3 straight weeks of Gene scripts on Have Gun. Starring as Madame Chalon is Mabel Albertson, an actress famous for playing uptight mothers and mothers-in-law in such films as Barefoot in the Park, What's Up, Doc?, and shows like That Girl and The Paul Lynde Show. Helene Stanley guest stars as Yvonne, and here we have another case of a guest performer being Disney royalty, though in this case, it's not for voice work. Yvonne was the model animators referred to as the basis for both Cinderella and Princess Aurora in Sleeping Beauty, though Disney would eventually give her some live-action screen time as Davy's wife in the Davy Crockett made-for-TV movies. She retired from acting in 1961 when her first son was born. We lost Helene in 1990. As Cecile, we have Belgian-born actress Roxanne Berard. She could also be seen in episodes of Maverick, The Joey Bishop Show, 77 Sunset Strip, and Get Smart. In 1970, she too gave up acting and took up painting. But first, she played a different character in 2 later episodes of Have Gun, making her one of the show's very few repeating characters. We lost Roxanne in 2019. Rounding out the 3 brides is actual French actress Danielle de Metz, and this is a very early career appearance for her. The only earlier credit for Danielle on IMDb is a role in the movie Return of the Fly. She would go on to co-star in 1962's movie The Magic Sword, which not only became the target of an episode of Mystery Science Theater 3000, but also featured the future star of The Lieutenant, Gary Lockwood. Her TV appearances included Voyage to the Bottom of the Sea, I Dream of Jeannie, and unrelated guest starring roles on both The Man and the Girl from U.N.C.L.E. One of her Man from U.N.C.L.E. guest turns got her an Emmy nomination. Playing Jay Brody, Lane Chandler was a fixture of both the big and small screens, and he started his acting career in the 1920s. In the 30s, he starred in such films as Firebrand Jordan and The Lightning Express, but in the 1940s the parts got smaller and Lane sometimes went uncredited, as he did for a minor role in Flash Gordon Conquers the Universe. TV gigs in the 50s put both his face and his name on the screen, and he was seen in guest roles in Maverick, The Life and Legend of Wyatt Earp, and no fewer than 4 further episodes of Have Gun, each time as a different character. Lane Chandler died in 1972. Richard Boone's stuntman, Hal Needham, plays one of Brody's sons, as does actor Dallas Mitchell, who would later be seen in the original Star Trek as Tom Nellis in Charlie X. But first we'll run into Dallas again in no fewer than 3 episodes of Gene's series The Lieutenant. The third Brody brother is played by Carol Henry, who will again feature in a Gene script in a 1960 episode of the Western series Hotel de Paris. Act 1. At the Hotel Carlton, you'd think Paladin was reading the funny papers. Hey Boy is puzzled as to what in the newspaper could have Paladin laughing out loud, so Paladin reads the article that has him tickled. It involves mail-order brides being intercepted by eligible bachelors before they can reach their destination of Bend in the River, Oregon. Apparently, a rancher named J. Brody ordered some eligible ladies for his sons, only for them to never appear. This sounds like a job for Paladin. Lyman, a stagecoach operator with whom Paladin has been in contact, runs into the hotel in a panic. The girls did arrive from France, but the coach they were traveling in has gone missing. Paladin tells Hey Boy to hold his mail and get his saddlebags ready. He's going to have to solve this mystery on site in Oregon. And that's where Paladin spots the coach at a dead standstill next to a raging river, guarded by an older woman with a rifle. Meet Madame Chalon. She thinks the animals in this country are as barbaric as the people. Despite the fact that she's aiming a weapon at him, demanding that he help get the stranded coach and its horses unstuck, Paladin isn't terribly worried. First off, where the coach is concerned, he's literally got the receipts, as well as correspondence with J. Brody. And if that doesn't impress Madame Chalon, maybe his business card will. No dice, Paladin. Good, bad, she's the lady with the gun. Although the safety's on, and it's not loaded. Doesn't matter. Paladin helps get the horses and wagon backed up out of the rut they have fallen into. Still chuckling about the whole thing, Paladin says he knows about the brides. And there they are, 3 French girls hiding under a blanket in the coach. While Paladin is momentarily stunned by how beautiful they are, he still finds the situation very funny. Act 2. With his own horse bringing up the rear, Paladin is now Madame Chalon's coach driver. After a day of travel, they reach another spot along the river where Paladin plans to set up camp for the night. Madame Chalon agrees and suggests he get to it. Not so fast. Paladin points out that in this country, men and women pitch in equally. That suggestion is rejected, to put it politely. Paladin goes off to hunt for some dinner, returning with a couple of rabbits that he skins and roasts over a fire. While Paladin prepares his barbaric feast, the girls complain that all Madame Chalon has for them are sandwiches that aren't very filling and wine that has turned to vinegar. She finally gives in, and they share Paladin's dinner and his campfire. The journey continues, and any time they encounter a problem, Paladin uses it to teach the girls some useful frontier skills, like pushing a wagon out of a rut. Even though it's exhausting, the 3 young French ladies don't seem to mind, though their governess does nothing but complain. After another night's sleep, the coach has almost reached Bend in the River, Oregon. Paladin suggests that the girls get back under cover, and when armed horsemen approach as soon as they're done fording a stream in the wagon, it seems like Paladin's instincts are correct. If someone attacks the coach, it'll happen here, where it's moving the slowest and the horses are tired. An older man with 3 younger men in tow stops them and specifically asks about whether there are women in the coach. Oh, hey, one of the young men puts his hand on the blanket and finds them. Cover blown. Madame Chalon starts to panic as the old man mentions that his name is Brody. J. Brody. He and his sons were here awaiting the arrival of 3 school teachers from Boston, not 4 French women. Paladin is a bit confused. It turns out Madame Chalon's papers got mixed up at Lyman's stagecoach office, but she kept up the pretense of bringing mail-order brides across the country because she felt that Paladin offered their best chance of survival. Paladin's been had, but he's got a backup plan. Everybody out of the wagon, we're setting up camp here and now. And the girls know how to do it because of the skills they've picked up on the long ride west. Suddenly, J. Brody is convinced that maybe these are the right 3 brides for his 3 sons. And as for Madame Chalon, well, Mr. Brody is a widower, and he would be happy to offer her a home. Paladin suggests the 2 talk it over, and as they do that, he mounts his own horse and rides off toward home. The end.
Excellent recap as always, Earl.
I tried not to get bogged down in all the mud.
I don't blame you. There was quite a bit of mud in this episode.
Yes, and you can take that any way you like, and you will still be correct. In the opening scenes, I think that may actually be my favorite part of the show, Paladin and Heyboy as a kind of comedy double act. And then Lyman runs in, acting like he's got the vapors, and that makes it even funnier. I mean, they were already having a good chuckle before he got there, and then he gets there, and he looks like he's about to faint dead away, to the point that Paladin has to reach over and shut him up, actually.
That was really interesting, like, oh no, like, my cargo has escaped. I know this was a thing. This episode was rooted in reality, that there were mail order brides were a thing that occurred back in the olden days as people were moving west, and there were lots of men and no women, and we need somebody to cook and keep house. So
yeah, heaven forbid we do it ourselves.
My mom told me once, like, before she and my dad got married, he hired a lady to come in and, like, clean and do wash and cook. He never did any of that. I know that you can do these things, but I don't know.
Wow. I mean,
yeah.
I don't have anyone doing my cooking and cleaning.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not exactly starving. So it can be done. It can be done,
mm-hmm.
guys. That first scene of Paladin on horseback looking for the wagon, that is some pretty treacherous terrain that he is navigating. And I cringed a bit that they were having the horse actually do that, like kind of slide down that little hill.
Yeah.
With Richard Boone on its back. I mean, I'm sure that had to be thrilling for him, seeing as he was apparently not a fan of his equine co-star, sadly.
Oh, no.
Yeah, apparently he was not a fan of horses. Did you pay any attention to the music in this one?
It was definitely different. It was had a little more bounce to it.
I mean, some of it they were obviously doing comedy music, but there was a melody that they kept referencing that I recognized, and I had to do some digging. Look, I don't actually try to connect everything that we cover in this podcast to Star Trek, but guess what? The music is constantly referencing the French folk song Auprès de ma blonde, which is the same song that Jean-Luc and Robert Picard are drunkenly, I don't want to call it singing, they're grunting it, after they get white boy wasted on some Chateau Picard in the Next Gen episode Family, after they've had their big fight in the mud. Oh, we're back with the mud. Oi.
All roads lead to mud.
Yes, especially this week.
All roads are made of mud this week.
Yeah. This almost has to have been a score created specifically for the episode, and yet no composer was credited. So that song dates back to the 17th century. It has been used as a military cadence and also as a drinking song.
Either march to war or march to the bar.
One letter's difference.
Exactly. The line, I can assure you that if I ever order a mail order bride, it will be from your catalog. That made me laugh. Her introducing all of the girls kind of, for me, was somewhere in between the Von Trapps in The Sound of Music and Gandalf introducing everybody as they enter Bjorn's house in The Hobbit.
And maybe just a hint of the original Mickey Mouse Club.
Yes!
Because they were popping up like we're playing whack-a-mole. Like,
I have blossomed like a tulip. Like, oh my god.
Oh.
Did not say that. What a line.
All those outrageous accents. Go away before I taunt you a second time.
Also, these girls just giggle all the time. I mean, I am a girl, and I am prone to giggling. but I think it's just because I think I'm hilarious. So hey, there I go. But when I hang out with my girlfriends, we aren't giggling like 24/7, and all I ever hear like from the back of the wagon is hee 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 hee.
I think they were hauling extra clothes, Madame Chalon's picnic basket, and a couple of big tanks of nitrous oxide.
They must have been.
Because, I mean, there was some serious laughing gas going on here. I mean, it was just... It didn't stop until they were having to push that wagon out of the rut themselves, when Paladin was trying to show them how to do that. That was the first point at which I suddenly noticed, oh, wait, the constant giggling has stopped. Now, as far as all these wagon fixes go, we really are playing Oregon Trail in this episode. First off, we're going to Oregon. Paladin goes hunting for food. We have to ford the stream. Everything but dysentery.
Hey, I'm glad nobody got dysentery. Nobody wants to see that.
After the past few weeks, I was happy to have a show that was not a bummer. However,
yeah,
my brain kind of went to a dark place here. At the end of this story, there are still 3 teachers from Boston unaccounted for. The women that Brody was expecting to show up. He wasn't expecting the French ladies to show up. He was expecting school teachers from Boston. Are we worried about the fact that they are a no-show here?
I mean, I have concerns. I'm going to choose they are teaching someone math somewhere. That is what I'm going to choose to believe, because I also was like, so what happened to those? I feel like somebody would notice that. I did have a couple other observations, Earl. The line crude, unsanitary, even uncouth, but I think you will find them delicious, says Paladin, in reference to his
biscuits.
His biscuits a la Paladin. But to me, that also describes like pretty much every trip to Taco Bell ever.
Yes. I no lie detected. I have no notes here.
See, he kept going on. Like the second time I watched it, it's like he just described every trip to Taco Bell.
Yeah.
Oh. Now, again, was it just me? Because I did not get to go watch Mud's Women again, because we're obviously drawing some parallels here, and it's been a minute since I've seen that one. But I also got 7 Brides for 7 Brothers vibes with this, except it's 4 brides for 3 sons and a father. Which, I mean, I kind of unironically love 7 Brides for 7 Brothers. Yes, there are many problems with 7 Brides for 7 Brothers, but I think part of the reason I love it is because it's so, like, politically incorrect that he will never be made again.
Yeah.
And the music is fun. The music is still fun. I mean, come on. What musical that opens with, bless your beautiful hide? Like, how can you not love that? It's so absurd.
We can only hope that there's a context for the songs beyond the story.
Right.
And that they can live on. But yeah, I don't see anyone mounting a new production of that in 2024.
No. Had 7 Brides for 7 Brothers. I mean, I know it was a musical before it was a movie, but did the, 1954, yeah, so this would have been in the wake of 7 Brides for 7 Brothers.
Yeah. And there was a movie by the title Les Girls several years ahead of this, but no real connecting tissue there. It's just Gene liked the title. Okay, Ashley, something I kept telling myself throughout this episode is, wow, this is really funny, light comedy, if you can set aside the whole human trafficking element.
Yeah. I guess maybe I should have put this in silly observations, but I know they were going to Bend in the River, Oregon, which, based on Googling, was not a real place. I'm going to assume this is a stand-in for Bend, Oregon. So I'm just imagining them taking the Oregon Trail to the last Blockbuster.
A worthy destination.
My best buddy got to go there last year. She got to spend a day in Bend in between flying to Hawaii. So I was like, hey, that's a cool place to hang out. So, but got to go to the last Blockbuster, which is pretty cool.
Yeah. Madame Chalon said she was going to run a saloon in Bend in the River. She obviously should have just chucked that in for a Blockbuster.
Yeah, seriously.
But the disturbing thing is, we've talked before about saloon girls.
Mm-hmm.
And now we have this mail order bride thing going on. Which is worse? It is the mail order bride thing, isn't it?
Yeah, at least as a saloon girl, you have some measure of agency.
Yeah. But the thing about the mail order bride thing is it's not just fiction. This was once considered a viable escape for women seeking better conditions or perhaps more financial security than they could find where they already lived, whether they were American citizens or were traveling to the States specifically to find a husband. So I did a little bit of digging. In the 1850s, so we're roughly 25 years prior to the time frame of Have Gun Will Travel, the ratio of men to women on the West Coast during the gold rush was approximately 7 men for every woman. So trying to recruit women to come to the U.S., or if they were already in the U.S., move west, that was not uncommon. And it did become a business model for entrepreneurs, both domestic and foreign. Although on paper, it was frequently promised that the potential brides could refuse to marry anyone who didn't meet their standards. In practice, this was not always the case. And let's face it, the further away from home you were, the more stranded you were in a given situation. Now here's the real shocker. Mail order brides are an institution that has not really gone anywhere. At the beginning of this century, now keep in mind this data would be about 20 years old, was estimated that the number of women signing up to become mail order brides was over 150,000 globally. It's 2002. Those numbers come from.
What conditions is a person facing when this is seen as a better option?
I would imagine extreme poverty, possibly living in war-torn areas, and perhaps even parts of the world where these women would have fewer rights if they stayed put than they would have as a woman in the United States in the 1870s, 1880s. If you can even imagine that.
Right.
It boggles the mind, and yet trying to contemplate what they were trying to get away from, it leads down an even more disturbing path.
Yeah.
And yes, there is a very muddy elephant in the room here. Mail order brides are the backbone of the plot of one of Star Trek's earliest episodes, Mudd's Women, which, despite being written and made 7 years after this episode of Have Gun, aged even less well. Now, I feel the need to point out that even though Stephen Kandel gets the teleplay credit on that Star Trek episode, the story is credited to Gene himself, and so I'm not saying there are one-to-one parallels, but it's really close. At least in Les Girls, the ladies are accompanied by Madame Chalon, who is at least trying to put on a good show of protecting her protégés. Yeah, maybe she doesn't know how to handle a firearm, but how many guys are going to get close enough to actually figure that out?
Right.
It also helps that she's a woman. It is near impossible to go back and watch Mudd's Women and think of Harry Mudd as anything other than a pimp. Plus, Mudd's Women has the really problematic drug angle as well, which is something that this version of the story does not have, thankfully. So, actually, I think Les Girls edges out Mudd's Women by quite a bit. It's that much less disturbing than Mudd's Women. There is another element of Les Girls that definitely does hold up better than Mudd's Women, and that is that Paladin is teaching the girls some skills. And it is pointed out that they are bulking up muscle-wise from all the exercise. Although the episode is trying to make the point that this is making them more marriageable, on the frontier of the American West. In my mind, there's a little bit of an unspoken implication that if they can push a wagon out of the rut, they could probably throw a punch now, too. And that's a much better bargain than Mudd's women got.
Yeah, would agree with all of that, Earl. I also thought this harkened back to something I remember hearing in history class, I think. In the West, there was not necessarily men's work or women's work. There was just work. And so, while, yes, there was some certain gender division, unless you were obscenely wealthy, there was no such thing as a kept woman in the West.
And yet, somehow, the tasks still wound up being gendered.
Yeah.
I can appreciate Paladin making that statement that everyone's got to put in their fair share of the work, but for the time, you still know where the pieces are going to land on that board. So I hate to take up the whole discussion with comparing this to a Star Trek episode, but this is a case where the stories are so similar, but I just feel like this one's better because Mudd's women has not aged well. I remember when Mudd first showed up on Discovery, and people were like, wow, he's nasty and violent. Don't they remember that Mudd was this figure of fun? It's like, he was a figure of fun who was a pimp.
Say, Mudd was scummy in the original series. Anything Rainn Wilson did was an improvement.
Yeah. I did not have a problem seeing Rainn Wilson's Mudd as the same character that we saw in the original series, just younger. Yeah, he was never a good guy.
No. The beard versus just the mustache was an improvement, though.
Yes.
made him look slightly less scummy.
Yeah.
No shade on any of our listeners who sport a very dashing mustache. I know a lot of mustachioed fellas, and they all pull it off very well. But Harry Mudd's was grody.
Yeah. But very much of its time.
Oh, of course.
But I liked it at least here with this episode of Have Gun. There's been a massive mix-up. I'm still I have conflicted feelings about the outcome. Right. Especially since we still have 3 women missing out there who no one really cares to go looking, I guess.
Well, that's somebody else's problem, LOL.
I guess it's Lyman's problem. Maybe they're still sitting in his office in San Francisco. Who knows?
Maybe so.
But it's an interesting case where you really can trace the evolution of a story from here to more or less the same story showing up in Star Trek. And after setting aside my discomfort with the mail order bride angle, this one seems like harmless fun. And it's over in half an hour. Star Trek takes an hour with it and gets disturbing with it. We have the Venus drug, we have the fact that Harry Mudd is a pimp, and it's far more disturbing in that form. I think I like this earlier version of it much better before it was embellished.
Perhaps, we see, by the time we get to Mudd's women, we see some growth in Gene. We're like, actually, this was maybe not such an innocent and playful story as we once thought. Let's show how scummy and gross this actually is.
Actually, I almost hesitate to look for a message here. Episodes like this that make light of a situation that didn't work out that well for far too many real people, it's a bit of a curate's egg. You have to accept a wagon load of special pleadings, such as, please ignore the human trafficking angle, to give yourself permission to relax and enjoy them. It is amusing in a retro kind of way. I tried to put myself in the mind of an audience member watching this in 1959, particularly after how grim episode in Laredo was. I will admit to this being a much-needed change of pace in that regard. Richard Boone is having so much fun with it, and that gives us a little bit of permission to have a laugh, too. I always like it when Paladin just laughs out loud at a situation. It's like, oh, okay, good, we can laugh at it, too. It's okay.
Yeah, he was grinning in almost every single scene in this episode.
Yeah, Yeah, he was having fun.
Mm-hmm.
Still, I cringe a little bit at the thought of little Jimmy or little Jenny sitting around the family TV set in 59. Mom, Dad, what are mail-order brides? And probably getting a very watered-down answer. Especially since the girls in this episode, they seem to be having a good time too. They couldn't stop giggling. So I kind of cringe over papering that stuff over. Because watered-down answers or watered-down portrayals, that's what allows the practice to continue. But it is at least significantly less icky than Mutt's women. The Girls is so tantalizingly close to having a good message or two within it. The scene where Paladin says men and women are both expected to work equally, well, that seems daringly close to being ahead of its time. Except it's a lecture being delivered to a coach full of mail-order brides. It's an amusing slice out of another time, but the fact that some elements of the story are still a thing and they are still a disturbing thing knocks a little bit of the shine off of it for me. What about you?
Yeah, and, we hear a lot about human trafficking and sex trafficking these days, but you don't always make that connection that mail-order brides were a type of human trafficking. And still are, apparently.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I don't know that my brain had fully lined up both of those things, other than I'm watching this episode and I'm thinking, yeah, but what if these guys are awful? What if these guys are scumbags? Like, what do? You're stuck. And I'm like, no, I could never do that. Like, and yet we have to think about, okay, what is prompting these girls to make this choice? And clearly it doesn't sound like any of them are coming from these horrible circumstances where this was a better option. It just seems like, oh, this might be a fun career opportunity for me in the States. I wonder what American men are like, and are they all as handsome as Monsieur Paladin? And I was like, oh my gosh, can everyone stop falling in love with Paladin? Please. Please. I feel like I'm going to say this throughout the entire run of our coverage of Have Gun Will Travel.
And keep in mind, they were not coming here to be mail-order brides. They were going to open a saloon, and these were going to be the saloon girls. So I'm kind of stunned that, okay, Paladin rides off, and we've just kind of drop-kicked them into this situation now.
Mm-hmm.
Not sure how I feel about that.
Yeah.
Is it funny? Is it entertaining? Yes. And like I said, there's a lot more levity, especially, 1 week after episode in Laredo. Yeah, we needed some laughs there. It's just that underneath the laughs, I'm kind of concerned at the scaffolding that holds this story up. I think this is a then versus now problem. We see this problem as an injustice.
Yes.
And an institutionalized one. And, I kept waiting for Paladin to speak up and say something like, is this what you really want to do? But he never does, because it was normalized at the time, and sadly still is.
I don't know that there's anything more to glean from this other than let's consider the time period in one which it's set, two, which it is being written, because those are different.
Right.
And also consider what's changed now. I doubt very seriously you're going to get a modern day tale of any sort about mail order brides on TV.
Or at least not one that is comedic.
Right. Yeah.
Not one that isn't going to seriously flag the implications underlying it.
Yeah, and this episode, I think in particular, the scene where they've arrived and met the Brodies, and all three Brody boys, they've already hopped in the wagon and each picked a girl, and they all look like they're at speed dating.
Well, thank goodness it was the Brodies.
Yeah,
You don't know that going in. There is some actual tension in that scene,
right?
when it starts, because it's like, who are these guys? They're armed.
Yeah, I fully anticipated a gunfight.
Yeah.
Thankfully, that was not what we got, but also like, oh, it's really fortunate that there's again, this is the Seven Brides for Seven Brothers comparison my brain kept drawing, where these guys are all like really happy. Oh, hello, we got 3 pretty ladies, and they've each just, picked one, and then the one guy says, "I'd marry any of them." I'm like, oh, all right. Did you ask any of them?
Yeah, do they get a say?
Do they get to say, like, oh, no, I like Le Brother over here best. I like Monsieur Hal Needham over here. Which, by the way, since our last recording, I was reminded that Hal Needham was the director of Cannonball Run.
Yes.
That makes me very, very happy. He directed something else I listened to a podcast about recently. I was like, oh, wait, Hal Needham, I know that guy.
That guy had a future. Marry that one.
Yeah. Marry him. Not only is he the best paid stuntman of his time, also did Cannonball Run.
And sadly, that's like the best reason any of these girls could have for going along with any of this. And it's a meta thing that's not actually part of the story, because we're talking about the actor versus the character that he very briefly plays.
Mm-hmm.
So there are issues here, and you just kind of have to... There's fun to be had here as well. It just... Why must we shut off our brains to find it?
Right. Earl, I think it's safe to say we can check out, unhitch our wagon at Bend in the River, Oregon, go to a wedding or a saloon, and maybe hit up the last Blockbuster. What do you think?
That sounds like a plan. She could still open her saloon.
She could. This could be a fancy business venture.
Yeah, the girls could still work there.
Mm-hmm.
Don't know how their husbands would feel about that.
Yeah, probably not great.
Almost wish there was a follow-up to this story, and not the follow-up that made Roy Carter seem like a disappointing human being.
Right.
Mission Log Gene-ology is produced by Roddenberry Entertainment. If you would like to support us directly, you can do so at patreon.com/missionlog for early access to shows and the Mission Log Discord. If you have any material that might be of interest to us that isn't already in the Roddenberry archive, drop us a line at missionlog@roddenberry.com. Our website is missionlogpodcast.com.
On the next Gene-ology, the Posse. Special thanks to consulting producers Matt Esposito, Homer Frizzell, Julie Miller, Mike Richards, Mike Schabel, Paul Shadwell, and David Takechi.
We'll be back next week with more of your favorite programs. This concludes our broadcast day.
This is a Roddenberry podcast. For more great podcasts, visit podcast.roddenberry.com.